Everyone is doing great. So this is just a short project demo. This is a project that I've been working on over the last couple of weeks, so 3 to 4 weeks approximately. And to give an overview about my project, what it essentially is it is an AI-based podcast questionnaire generator. So as you all know, I run this podcast series, Entrance and Beyond. And in the podcast series, something that's really important is structuring your questions. And what I usually do is I send a basic questionnaire to my guests so that they can be prepared about the topics that we're going to talk about, and just so that they're not really blank in the podcast. And this is something that serves as a reference, so it's not something that I directly read off of. It's just something that acts as a reference for our guests, so they're well prepared and they can tell the best about their experiences and answer the question to their fullest without actually wasting time in thinking too much about the question. So that's an overview for my project, and I'll just show a demo and then things will come clearer. So I'm in Flask code. I'm just gonna run a simple command, Python 3 app.py. It's gonna get everything set up and running. So the server is set up, development server as we call it. And I'm gonna open it up. So HTTP 8000 port number, and this is the interface that you'll see. So you have to enter guest name. So I have a guest name, supposedly Kabir Ahmed Merchant. He's a friend of mine, and he has this AI startup. Just to give a brief idea about what he has. Now we have to enter the topics I want to discuss. So I've stored it over here just to save some time. So we have to enter two things. The first thing that we have to enter is enter all the topics to cover. So this is a list of all the topics that you want to cover in your podcast. So for example, I want to cover introduction about Kabir, background story, evolution as a coder, so on and so forth, and enter main topics. These topics are essentially the topics that you want to emphasize in your podcast. So I have it stored over here just again to save some time. So I'm going to copy it simply, paste it in, and for example, how did your startup begin, so on and so forth. After that, you have to attach your guest resume. So I'm simply going to go attach Kabir's resume and attach referencing. So this is a cool feature, and essentially what this is this is a YouTube videos link, and it's any podcast that you find interesting and you sort of like the structure and the theme of that podcast. So you can use data related to the theme of the podcast, and you can basically use that podcast to sort of structure out your podcast episode. So, for example, I found this cool podcast where Arvinder Srinivas, the co-founder and CEO of Perplexity, sat down at Stanford and he talked about his journey in this cool podcast. So I'm just going to copy its link. I'm going to attach its reference link and I'm going to paste it. And now the backend processing has begun. So that is all that the user has to do. They have to enter their guest name. They have to enter the topics they want to cover. They have to enter the main topics, the topics again that they want to emphasize in their podcast. They have to attach the guest resumes, and they have to attach reference links. So at this point in time, it's just supports YouTube. And now let's try to understand what happens in the backend while the backend processing continues. So essentially what happens in the backend is there are many different things that occur. So firstly, what happens is a guest resume, which is present in PDF format, it's converted to text. And after that, from the text, we generate the resume, we convert it into a JSON format. So we use named entity recognition. Most of you have probably heard about that. You probably heard about it in NLP. And what essentially that is, it means assigning a name to an entity. That is what it means. So essentially, for example, in the resume, we have things such as degrees, a designation, projects, so on and so forth. So that is what we're doing over here. We're converting the resume into a JSON format where we have entities such as designation, degree, duration, year of graduation, skills, so on and so forth. And that is what is happening in the background with the guest resume. And why are we doing this? We're simply doing this due to the fact that LLMs and small language models find it easier to process JSON format of data as compared to actually typing it out. So that is why we're just doing that sort of processing. And now let's try to understand what happens with the referencing that we attach. So we essentially take the transcript from the YouTube video, and currently we're just supporting English transcripts. We can simply add a translation API in between that would help convert the transcript to English for further processing, or directly we could try to process the transcript in whatever language it is, but currently we're just supporting English. We take this transcript, we break it down into various chunks, and you find the underlying theme of each of these chunks. And after doing this, what we're doing is we're taking all these underlying themes, these chunk underlying themes, and we're combining it together to find the overall structure and underlying theme of the reference video that you have attached. And we're doing this in chunks iteratively due to the fact that it's easier to process as compared to processing a huge chunk of data, because let's see, this podcast is like 52 minutes long, so it's not the best idea to maybe process the entire length of the podcast at once. That's why we're breaking it down into chunks, finding out the underlying theme of that chunk, and just combining it. So at the end of all of this, finally what happens is that all this data name of the guest, topics to cover, main topics, then guest resume, which has been converted to basically our JSON format, and team related data from our attached reference links. That is, this data is taken as input, and an output is viewed. That is all that happens, and the output is then simply put into a PDF, and you can simply download it. If you think that the PDF is good, you've gotten all the answers that you want, you've gotten all the questions that you want, you can directly download it, send it to your guest. That is all that our product does. So now let's talk about the tech stack. So I've used HTML, CSS, JavaScript for the front end. That is fine. For the back end, I've used Flask, which is pretty clear from the start of this video. And apart from this, the main thing that I've used is I've used Ollama. And for the folks that are not familiar with Ollama, Ollama essentially allows you to manifest different AI models and run them locally. So as you can see, this is a website over here. You can download Ollama and you can run different models. For example, Ollama 3.3, DeepSeek, so on and so forth. And it's something that's pretty cool because you don't need API keys and all that. You can directly use Ollama into your Python projects. And everything's running locally. So even if there's no net or anything, that's not an issue. And I've used Llama 3 for this project. And as you can see now, the questions have been generated. So here we see we've got a customized question generator, evolution as coder, introduction, and yeah, we've got a good 30 questions. And the output somewhat depends upon the video that you post as input, because I had recently done this before, just like 2 minutes ago, and I got a different output. So I don't think it is there. Yeah, no, this is not it. I think it might have been overwritten if I'm not wrong. No, it's not overwritten. Yeah, so this was another response that I got, a more detailed response. So it depends basically on things such as the reference video that you have attached, but you get a pretty basic idea of the sort of questions that you get. And if I like it, it's fine. If I don't like it, I can just rerun it. So this is the format that we have, and it's pretty good because you don't want to ask too many questions. So it's, as you can see, it's talked about self-specific experiences. And let's see, it's around 2 to 3 questions for each topic, and overall 30 questions. It's more than enough, and it's developed in a matter of 2 to 3 minutes, and it's pretty lengthy if you go from the chat GPT sort of route. So yeah, I can then simply download it, and yeah, that is all that my project does. So thank you all for listening. Hopefully you got something out of this, and hopefully we can add more features such as integrate maybe LangChain for researching and so on and so forth, and we can make this project a bit better in the future. So thank you so much for watching, and do give some feedback in the comment section. That would really be appreciated.